Hey y'all. So there was a PTI event this past weekend in Portland, and I managed to take it down on Iyslander. So just thought I'll do a quick deck tech because I got some questions about the list. People are wondering what was up with it. So yeah, just thought I'll do a quick deck tech on it. And if you want to catch the stream, there was a Battle Hardened on Saturday. There was a Team Blitz event. You can check that out on the Savage Feats YouTube channel. And the PTI event on Sunday was streamed as well if you want to check that as well. So definitely would recommend if you want to get caught up on those events. So with that being said, let's get into deck tech. And when I say I'm doing a quick deck tech, I mean I'm kind of doing like an abridged version of it. Basically, I'm just mostly going over the reds or the non-blues rather, because a lot of the blues in Iyslander at this point are quite locked in. Like for example, this is the rest of the list here, and you really don't need me to tell you why Instead of Shield like Blizzard and Cold Snaps and Blue Ice Bolts are in the list. It's been pretty stock standard for quite a while. I will talk about a few blues which I'm running, which I think some people maybe aren't yet. I'll talk about a few of them, but most of them, I'm just not going to go over every single one of them. Not much point there. If you do want to check out a full deck tech that goes through every single card, I would recommend taking a look at the Runaways YouTube channel. They recently did a very, very comprehensive Iyslander deck tech where they go over every card and the point of every blue and when it's best used. So definitely would recommend checking that out. And since that content's already done, I'm just going to talk about the non-blues in my list. So with that, let's get right into it. So first things first, I want to talk about ratios. So basically in the 60 that I present to my opponent, how many blues do I want in them? And I feel like each Iyslander player has their own preference for the number of blues they want, and somewhere usually between 40 and 42. For me, the number is 41. I think 40 blues is way too few. I never get to resolve a red spell ever in my life, and 42 is absolutely ludicrous. I can't kill my opponent with blue frostings. And so 41 is the number that I've ended up on. I mean, I think that really comes down to personal preference. I wish I could give you the optimal number, but for me, it's 41. So 41 blues into every matchup, except wizards. That's a little weird. 41 blues every matchup. That means 19 non-blues. So the way that I have split that up is that I have these 10 in the middle, these 10 non-blues, which come in every matchup. Well, there are two exceptions, which I'll get into later. But these 10 come into pretty much every matchup, and then the remaining 9 is either this set over here, the attack actions that you bring in most matchups, or this set over here, these 9, that you bring into any deck that can run this card called Codex of Frailty. Because I do not like running attacks into Codex of Frailty, and I'll get more into that later when we talk about the lexi sideboard. So there you go. It's, the 19 non-blues I'm running is either this 19 over here or this 19 over here, depending on the opponent that I'm facing. So I'm just going to start with talking about these 10 in the middle here that I bring into basically every matchup. 6 Icevanes, 3 reds, 3 yellows. This card is amazing. I don't think there's anything much else to say. Like, any turn that I'm resolving a fused Icevane my opponent, I'm very, very happy with that turn cycle. So yeah, absolutely love having this playset of 6. Sink Below, honestly, it's so efficient. It's another, 1 card 4 value. Most decks you're running into are running attacks into. I also play this in the mirror. Definitely be careful of it in the mirror, obviously. Don't let them get a read that you have it in Arsenal. If you can, ideally, when you draw it, you play it. Because the mirror is really all about attack actions. If you know, like, say your opponent is specifically Rhea Adams, you probably shouldn't bring these in. But most of the Icelanders are running attacks into you, so these get value there as well. And then finally for the 10, so because it's 19 cards, what that means is I have 6 playsets. That gets me to 18, and then I have a 1-off, and that 1-off is Red Aether Hail, because I absolutely love this card. So, I mean, given that because of sideboard space I wanted 10 cards that I can bring into pretty much every matchup, this had to be a non-attack, because like I said, I don't like bringing attacks into decks with Codex of Frailty. But also, I absolutely love this card. It is 6 arcane damage, which in my opinion, in this meta specifically, where isn't a lot of Guardians and not a lot of people are running a lot of blues, 6 arcane damage, in my opinion, is very comparable to the 7 and 8 of Fighting Spirit and Wounded Bull, because it really taxes your opponent's resources. It is an amazing play off of Tunic. Just Tunic, Aether Hail for 4 is awesome. It blocks 3. It says ice on it, it is a solid Strider's target. For the end game, it can kill Thamai and still Waning Moon face. I absolutely love this card. I bring it in every matchup. I don't leave my house without it. I go to bed thinking about this card. It is amazing, and it pains me that I can't run more of this. It is just because of sideboard slots, I do. This is just the other 9 here or 9 here are just more essential to the game plans I'm trying to enact. That I can't run more of these, but I wish I could. I really, really like this card. Yeah, before moving into these other packages, well, okay, yeah, so let's put the attacks down here first. These are pretty standard. Scar, Fighting Spirit, Wounded Bulls, all of these basically get to convert 1 card into 4 or 2 cards into 8, right? Scar is 1 card 4, these 2 are 2 cards into 8. Very, very efficient, very, very effective at just whittling, just keeping pace with the opponent's aggression, bring them low enough for you to kill them with Striders. So just real quick, I'm going to go over the exceptions in these 10 that I was talking about earlier. So in the mirror, okay, I lied. I don't bring this in every matchup. I do not bring this into every matchup. Specifically, I just don't bring this into Wizards, into either the mirror or Kano. The 4 arcane damage spells I don't bring into it. So the 3 yellow Ice Veins and the 1 red Aether Hail. I don't bring, these become energy potions. The 3 yellow Ice Veins become energy potions. And then this becomes a freezing point, actually, just because in the event that sometimes the mirror can go pretty long. And so if you find this early, you can go ahead and pitch it. Or if you find it late, you may have Frost X or 2 set up on them. So this comes in for 7 or 8. Depending on the number of Frost X's you have, and it triggers all your chills that you hopefully have set up by then. So I'll just run as one off. Typically, though, you're just blocking with it or discarding it to a random chill effect that they have. So yeah, that's a mirror exception for the 10 in the middle. And don't worry about memorizing all this. There's a Fabry link in the description with all the matchups. I have all the sideboard plans laid out, so just go ahead and check that out. The other exception is these 3 Sink Billows. I don't bring them into Dromai. These 3 Sink Billows get swapped out for Freezing Point, for the 3 Freezing Points. Because into Dromai, I just want to race them before they can develop a board. And I really, really enjoy having tall arcane spells into Dromai, because especially if we find this early before they've set up Ash Rings, before they've got enough arcane barrier, this basically is just 5 unblockable damage and whittles them down pretty quickly. And even if they have AB, typically they're holding on to 4 reds. So I much prefer sending this at them compared to, say, something like a Fighting Spirit or Wounded Bull, because these cards let them convert their reds into 3 blocks, whereas this converts their red into 1 block, which is obviously a terrible rate, and also a Strider's target. That being said, I mean, please don't be fooled by Freezing Point being in the list. You are not supposed to be resolving Frost Hexes into Dromai, at least at this configuration of the list. You are not, so please don't do that. It is just Tall Arcane. The fused effect on this doesn't matter unless you have a chill that they really want to trigger. Just don't bother fusing this. This might as well just save 5 arcane and nothing else on it, into Dromai specifically. So with that, let's get into the elephant in the room, which is the Lexi matchup, and that is these 9 cards over here. I say Lexi, it also applies to Azalea. I mean, Azalea is also a bad matchup for us, and it kind of incidentally affects Uzuri, because actually these cards tend, like NKS in particular, of course, is also really going to Uzuri. But that was just incidental. Uzuri just got caught in the crossfire, really. These cards weren't put here because of Uzuri. They put here because of Lexi and Azalea, and Uzuri just happened to get pretty affected by them too, and is what I'd run into Uzuri anyway because they run Codex of Frailty. So with that, let's get into the Lexi matchup. Okay, so for Lexi, we are running these 19 cards over here, and you'll notice that there are no attacks in his 19 cards because of Codex of Frailty. And I'm just going to speak a little bit about the philosophy that I ended up on for the Lexi matchup. And there's 2 core, I guess, principles or 2 tenets here that I decided that I came to from my testing. The first one is no attack actions, particularly because it is hard enough to land meaningful disruption into Lexi as it is. They just, they keep drawing so many cards from 3 of a kinds and Ponders and Heat Seekers and Endless Arrows. They are also resistant to disruption because they draw a lot of cards. They also can play tricks with you because Voltaire is instant speed, so they get to play around Frostbites, maybe get through like 1 extra channel tax because they Voltaire in response to the channel being played. And essentially I found it was very, very difficult for me to land meaningful disruption into them, and it gets even worse if they are able to disrupt me with cards like Codex of Frailty, because a lot of times what I want to do is they're in the middle of the turn, and I've and I make the read that I think a Frostbite would be pretty good here. So I play my Arsenal out, and say so I pitch a card, play my Arsenal, and I'm holding on. My remaining 3 cards are a Fused Icevane, let's say, that I really want to send on my turn, and they play through my Frostbite and they play a Codex. And if I have an attack in my graveyard, I'm really sad because I need to give up my Fused Icevane in exchange for some random vanilla attack that has -1 on it because of Frailty. So not only am I not disrupting them, I'm sending just not a great attack, and I'm eating all the damage. It just feels really, really bad every time they make me give up a Fused Icevane hand because of Codex. And the alternative is I don't play my Arsenal, so if I'm holding on to that to play around Codex of Frailty, it just gets really, really awkward, and I really didn't enjoy being in that position. So the first principle I ended up on was I do not want to run attacks into a deck like Lexi. The second one is that I can't play fair into Lexi, which is a bit of a weird principle to state, but what I mean is that I can't block them efficiently because they have infinite breakpoints, and I'm a deck that doesn't run armor. I can't block them efficiently. At the same time, I cannot I cannot outpace them. I can't even match pace with them. Because since I can't block those on-hits effectively, I'm letting these on-hits through, or I'm blocking inefficiently, in which case I'm still not keeping pace. Or I'm letting the on-hits through, which will be like, this card goes back to hand, or, get the top card of your arsenal, of your deck into your arsenal, or make a ponder, or give me a blood rod. All that sorts of stuff. So I can't match pace with that, and that is in contrast with something like, say, Briar, right? So Briar, on an average turn, is Nimblism, Rabble into Scar, which is a pretty efficient play, but I can match that. I can say block 3 to 6 on the Rabble, and then send my own 2-card 8, and I'm not necessarily outpacing them, but I'm matching pace with them, and that's good enough, because I have Striders and they don't. With Lexi, though, that is just simply not the case. In Lexi, those on-hits are coming through, or I'm blocking inefficiently, and I'm just slowly bleeding value for the whole game. So essentially what it came down to was, what I realized was that if I try and battle them on the combat chain, if I try to deal with their arrows when they're on the combat chain, I will just lose. I cannot block that, I cannot outpace that, and so I came down to a conclusion that the only way I win is if I don't let them play those arrows in the first place. Which is such a weird and bold thing to say, oh yeah, I'm just not gonna let them play arrows. But it came about because I realized in testing, the only games I was winning against Lexi was if I find 2 copies of Channel Lake Frigid in the first half of my deck, and they don't find any 3 of a kinds. Which sadly enough actually did happen in my finals game against Lucas. It was honestly, I kind of high rolled. I just found channels. It was a 7 or 8 turn game, and I got 5 turns on channel into him, and he didn't see a 3 of a kind until the last turn. But yeah, that's basically the only turns in my testing, the only games into Lexi in my testing that I was winning. So to try and up the consistency of having channel-esque, more channel-esque turns, this is effectively what I ended up on, and I'm just gonna go over, I guess, the evolution of this as well. So at first, this is back in the days when they still had bullseye braces, and they weren't on trench yet. That was when NKs got added to the list, because NKs, it can potentially just stop Alexi's turn. If they have a face down arrow in Arsenal, which is pretty likely, you encase them and it hits. That arrow is the only thing that's coming through. They can't even snaps it because the snaps is frozen. So that arrow is the only thing that's coming through, and turns like that were what I was really aiming for, were turns where I just don't let them play the game. Of course, they moved on to Trench, but even still, even after they moved on to Trench, Encase has remained in the list, because even if they respond to my Encase with a Trench, I'm still very, very happy with that exchange. I made them give up a card and leak a bunch of Arcane, which, if you think about it, is the exact same thing as Aether Icevane, right? Aether Icevane is I deal a bunch of Arcane and I take a card from them. If they Trench in response to my Encase, I've accomplished the exact same thing. So Encase, really like that into Lexi. It plays into the whole, I'm trying to just limit the amount of game actions that they are allowed to take. And then Weathervane. So at first, these were actually red Arcane Castrations. That was what I was trying, again, when Bullseye Braces was still around. And I realized I was getting more and more underwhelmed by the red Arcane Castrations, because a lot of times the Lexi will just pitch a blue, and then Trench to gain a resource, or just activate the Tunic if they were, on Tunic before they moved over to Trench. And a lot of times I was basically just coin flipping, whether they have a blue, and it just the red anti-incarcerations just felt quite unimpactful a lot of the times. It just wasn't enough. And then Weathervanes, I came to actually credit to Rhea Adams for that. So Rhea Adams' Proto Baltimore list had Weathervanes in them because they showed up to Proto Baltimore on Iyslander, and I was shocked because I was trying my encase and arte incarceration stuff, and it just wasn't good enough. So I showed up to the Proto on Lexi, and I was very shocked to see Rhea on Iyslander, and I asked, like, what is your tech? Like, how do you dare bring Iyslander? Because I tried to improve the matchup, and I really couldn't, and they told me that Weathervanes was actually something they introduced to the list. So after Pro Tour Baltimore, I came back to trying to play Iyslander into Lexi, and I went to and I tried Weathervanes as well, and I really liked it. But I still felt like something was missing, and I went even deeper, and I went into Freezing Point. I brought in 3 Freezing Points, which in my opinion really just brought this entire package together and really makes it work and really makes it sing. Why is Freezing Point necessary for this package, right? And the big reason why Freezing Point is necessary is because it actually makes these 2 cards so much more threatening. That's how Freezing Point fits into this. So previously, if you Weathervane them, and you don't have Freezing Point in the list, something they might just do is just try and AB whatever you fused with. So suppose you went Encase, or suppose you went Icevane, they just try and AB as much as they can, go over to their turn and just hold their cards and just not deal with the frostbites that you created with this. And then just hold their cards to AB whatever you're playing from Arsenal to try and leak some damage in. Now, that is still pretty good. Obviously, that ends up being the way it plays out. You're still pretty happy because you kind of took their whole turn. But you aren't leaking a lot of damage, and you aren't critically unmaking them deal with the frostbites, which is something that I really wanted them to do. I really wanted them to be kind of scared of just leaving this frostbites and going over to their turn. And that is where Freezing Point comes in. So, for example, even let's say even on just your own turn, if you get to play Weathervane into Freezing Point, how it works is that, Weathervane's going to put 4 frostbites on the stack. There's going to be a priority window after that, and then a Freezing Point is going to resolve. They can respond after a frostbites before the Freezing Point to deal with it, because if they don't, the Freezing Point comes in for 9, which is a big number. And that just plays more into if they paid 4 resources or 5 resources to do whatever they wanted to do on my turn, it just means that their turn is so much less effective, and played exactly in the game plan that I was trying to construct. And if they don't give me those cards on my turn, the Freezing Point comes in for a lot of damage. And this extends to Weathervane being fused with any other card in the list, Isotonal, Encases, and Icevanes, because if the frostbites are remaining on their turn as it goes to them, and I draw into this card, my kill range gets extended to somewhere between 15 and 20. So, for example, say it's just Weathervane, they have those 4 frostbites on them. I can play my Arsenal, give them the extra frostbite. Now I'm threatening Freezing Point that's coming in for 10 because there's 5 frostbites on them. Waiting Moon for 3, and if that Arsenal card was, a damaging spell, say an Aether Hail, there's your 15 damage right there. It gets even worse if you go Weathervane and Encase, and the frostbites hit. If the Encase hits and they don't deal with the frostbites, it gets even worse. This thing itself just comes in for 15. So the point of this card, and so make no mistake, like that is simply theory. It's just a theoretical limit of Freezing Point when you go Weathervane or you go Encase. But in practice, that's rarely going to happen. But the reason it doesn't happen in practice is kind of because of the theory. There's like a cyclical thing that because of the theoretical limit of what you can draw, they have to deal with the frostbites on your turn, which is massive. It's exactly what you want to do. For example, in my Swiss game against Levi, he was on Azalea. I went Weathervane into some fuse. I don't remember what it was. I think it might have been Ice Eternal. And Levi played his Rain Razors on my turn because he after the frostbites resolved, he pitched the rest of his hand to play Rain Razors on my turn. So I mean that's a big win, and I didn't even draw a Freezing Point in the next turn because you don't have to. You don't need to draw this after you do the Weathervane or the Encase thing. You just need to threaten them with it and make them deal and make them scared of these other cards. And that's part of what just makes this whole package just come together. Because I was thinking, can I cut any of these down to 2? Just a 2-up and try and fit something else in, like the E-strikes that you see I'm missing over here. I'll go into exclusions later. Turns out I really couldn't. And yeah, I'll just go into why right now. So 3 Weathervanes, I mean, these are extra copies of channel, effectively. 3 copies of Weathervanes, and then if you want to support these, you want to put more fusion cards in. So these are the fusion cards that go with it. Encase is particularly amazing because it's one of the... This and Ice Eternal are the only 0-cost fuses that you can do with Weathervane, which allows you to resolve that on smaller hands. Freezing Point just directly has so much synergy with Weathervane because it obviously comes in for 9 if you get a Weathervane before it, and it also has synergy where if you just manage to Weathervane the previous turn and you draw into this, it has this synergy. So, you know, Weathervane, I don't want to cut. I don't want to cut the Weathervane. Freezing Point, I just spoke about it. These 6 cards become way more threatening the more copies of Freezing Point that you have in your deck. Oftentimes in the end state, in the ending states of the game, if you do a Weathervane or an Encase, they might just go to their turn with the Frostbites and just make you have it, because they say if you have it, I lose anyway, but if I pay into it, I lose anyway. So they make you have it. The more copies of Freezing Point you have, the more times that you have it. Encase, I mean, works so well with these cards, with these other 6 for all the reasons I've already said. 0 cost to work with the Weathervane makes Freezing Point incredibly threatening just on its own. Oftentimes, if Lexi's on the Shock Charmers AB1 plan, you're probably going to get the Shock Charmers on the first Encase that you do, just because of this, just because of the threat of the Freezing Point, and then that opens them up to blue Icevanes later on. It's just on future Encases. So it is this whole package, these 9 cards. I tried to cut any one of them down to a 2-off instead of a 3-off, and I found it was very difficult. And I really do want that, just the threat that these cards present when they're together in the list like that. And then just a few extra points, which is, I mean, so it seems that a lot of Lexis nowadays are running Shock Charmers and AB1, and so just having more tall arcane spells also makes it less bad if you're forced to go first. So, for example, so usually you want to go second because it is, after all, a tempo matchup. But for example, in my quarterfinals game against Michael Feng, he was the highest seed, so he chose for me to go first. But I drew, it was either Freezing Point or Red Icevane in my opening hand, and since he only has AB1, between that and the Waning Moon, he started the game at 35, and I got to keep an arsenal. And so it's basically just extra copies of tall arcane spells. So if you just count, there's 3 5-damage arcane spells here, 3 more 5-damage arcane spells in the Icevanes, there's 6 5-damage arcane spells, and then 4 4-damage ones, the 3 yellow Icevanes, and the 1 red Aether Hail. That is 10 cards you're very happy to see going first into Lexi, because even the Hail, if they only have AB1, they're going to start the game at 36, and you're going to get an arsenal. So that's that's pretty big. That basically completely undoes the disadvantage of going first from a tempo standpoint. Aside from that, there's obviously 3 Insidious Chills you might find turn 0, and the 3 Channel Lake Bridges, which are very happy to set an arsenal turn 0. So that's like 16 cards out of your 60 they're pretty happy to see going first, which kind of, it's statistically likely that you'll see one of those. And yeah, there's 3 more in Silver Classic 13 because of the 3 freezing points. And if you don't see any of those 16, then you might see Weathervane with something like an Ice Eternal with an Encase. And now that's a little more iffy. What you should do in that case is you pass priority, they will load because they'll always load Voltaire, and then you can just resolve the Weathervane, let's say the Ice Eternal or the Encase, still get your arsenal, and hopefully, because they've spent the resource loading and put a card in arsenal, maybe they don't get to break the Frostbites on your turn. So, on the first real turn of the game, they already have 4 Frostbites on them. That is, I would say that is, that's if you don't draw one of the other 16 cards, that would be very, very good on turn 0. All that being said, I've covered the attack action matchup, as in when you bring attack actions in, and when you bring the anti-Codex of Frailty tech, the anti-Lexi tech in. And yeah, so with that, I'm going to move on to just some blues. Okay, so the blues. Well, okay, not all of these are unique. Plenty of arts on the list run these, but I do want to talk about them. The first one is Winter's Bite. 3 copies of Winter's Bite. I love this card, and I know it has been a little contentious within Iyslander players about whether they actually like the blue Winter's Bite. Some people prefer the reds or the yellows. I think that at this point in the meta, blue Winter's Bite is actually really amazing. The stonks of this card have really gone up because the matchups you care about no longer run Tunic into you. Lexis run Trench, Runeblades run Dyadic Carapace, and Dromai runs Furnace. So, I mean, Dromai always ran Furnace, but basically the Runeblades and the Rangers have gone off Tunic. And so the stonks of this card have gone way up, because now you're always getting a card instead of just getting the tuning counter, which is the way it used to be, and the reason why some Icelanders didn't like the Winter's Bite. There's no like Oldham in the meta right now that just Crown of Seeds and then pays the extra into Winter's Bite, or just use the tunic to pay for this. In a lot of the matchups, people aren't running tunic into you anymore, so this is just an awesome go again source to tax them. And also, and this is just I guess a personal bias that I have. I am a big fan of cards that tax my opponent 2 resources on their turn, because it leads to several blowouts. A lot of times, your opponents will be playing around you, giving them 1 Frostbite, and they're very rarely playing around 2, especially if you let priority pass a few times. So, for example, Channeling Frigid is something you do the moment you get priority. Like a lot of times, you would play Channeling Frigid immediately when you get priority on their turn, and then they know how much they're being taxed. But when you pass priority and you let them carry on with their turn, they are probably expecting at most 1 Frostbite. So when you play something like Winter's Bite from your arsenal, you can completely blow them out. And that definitely happened quite a few times for me this past weekend. And yeah, along with the fact that a lot of the matchups you care about no longer run Tunic, this is, in my opinion, a very, very strong blue to have in your Iyslander lists. Moving on to Warmongers Diplomacy. So for me, this card took over the Brain Freeze slot, and I'll talk about Brain Freeze in the Exclusion slot, but in any case, this card's actually bad. I was running this just to keep Lexis honest, and that it basically, force them to run Trench. Well, it's not like I was running them, they don't know this is in my list, but in general, the more people cut this from the list, the more Lexis can get away with running Tunic instead of running Trench. So I figured I'm going to do this, and if some Lexi tries to be bold and runs Tunic into me instead of Trench, you can really punish them with this card. Except that, my list I already run Encase, so I'm not sure how much this is even necessary. I only resolved this twice over the entire weekend. The first was into Levi's Azalea, and he just went E-Strike into an arrow from Arsenal, so it barely did anything there. And the second time was into Brody, because, I figured it's also decent to Runeblade. And it affected him a little, but unfortunately into Runeblade, I myself am running attacks. And so when I play this, I called Peace, because that's the default, at least at minimum I can Coronet Peak. I called Peace and I drew into a Wounded Bull that I couldn't play. So, I mean, those 2 experiences really make me not like this card. I don't think it is necessary, and I think Lexis still need to run Trench into you because of the Encase plan that my list has. So I would recommend, if you're looking to make changes to the list, I recommend, you go ahead and cut this. You already have Encase to force ranges, to force Lexi in particular to run Trench into you instead of Tunic. They can't get greedy with that, and yeah, and in other matchups, this is just absolutely a dead card. Heart of Fendel. This card's fine. You don't need it. If you have it, it's all right. It's not necessarily better. So in my list, to make space for the heart, I actually cut the 3rd Polar Blast. Again, I'll get to that in the exclusion section. But yeah, this card's okay. It did win me 1 game, I suppose. There was a game where I stayed at 1 life for the last few turns, and that 1 life definitely was given to me by the Heart of Fendel. I went up to 2, and I took another. I could partially block another 4 attack, went back down to 1, back on the back of Heart of Fendel. Got to keep an extra card. But there was like 1 game out of all the games that I played that it actually, in a sense, won me the game. Obviously, alongside the other plays that happened, but it's not necessary. If you don't have it, don't fret. It's fine. It's really just fine. I mean, yeah. So there was a 1 game that won me, but there's also other games where it kind of forced me into making plays I didn't necessarily want to make, because obviously this card is incredibly inflexible. All you can do is pitch it. I can't even arsenal it. I can't block with it. I can't play it. All I can do is pitch with it. So sometimes it forces you into a play you don't want to be in. Also, it is yet another non-block, and as you notice from the sideboard, it is pretty tight. This is pretty tight, and so it ends up being that I'm running 4 non-blocks, 3 Blizzards, and Heart of Findals. Sometimes in matchups I don't necessarily want to. Particularly Bravo. I have 3 Blizzards and Heart of Findal into Bravo, which isn't amazing. I was okay to make it a concession to Bravo because I wasn't expecting too many of them, and I didn't end up facing a Bravo. But still, it's not necessarily the place you want to be in. And if you want to cut a non-block, you can just Heart of Findal is a very, very easy cut. So yeah, those are the blues I wanted to talk about. go ahead and replace Warmong's Diplomacy. Don't bother spending $35 on that. You don't need Heart of Final. It's okay. You should definitely be running Winter's Bite. This card is absolutely amazing right now in this meta. I did say, into ranges and Runeblades, though, of course, saying is relevant to Runeblades doesn't quite matter anymore. This past weekend was the last weekend that, Runeblades were legal. I'm using Runeblades as the whole class because Rosetta Thorn is gone and there's just no weapon. There's, Vincent and Viscera are just kind of left in the dust. So yeah, Runeblades are no longer legal. So saying this is relevant to Runeblades doesn't super matter right now, but it's still relevant into Ranger and into Dromai. So, it was definitely the pick for this past weekend. If eventually you cut this for some other blue that you like, I think it depends on the meta, but this past weekend it definitely was absolutely amazing. Okay, so Exclusions. The first one is, it's just one copy of Polar Blast. I still have 2 copies in the list. What I just often was finding was, I'm running 41 blues, and that often meant that when I was siding into 60, I was always cutting 1 blue from the list. A lot of times that would be like, I cut a 1 Ice Eternal into Briar, for example. Into aggro matchups, I cut the 1 off like random Ice Eternal, which is okay, but when I was struggling to find sideboard slots, I figured that sort of inefficiency of always, cutting 1 blue in my different 60s, I might as well just try and find 1 blue that I won't really miss. I'll just cut it from the list entirely, and for me that was Polar Blast. It's block 2. I was very hesitant to cut a block 3 from the list entirely, though arguably, and Ice Eternal, like I said, was very critical to like my Lexi game plan, so I didn't want to cut something like Ice Eternal, and it turns out there are very, very few blues that you're okay to cut. And so for me, that was Polar Blast. Went down to 2 Polar Blasts, but as I was speaking earlier about the Heart of Findal, if you don't have the Heart of Findal, feel free just to cut the Heart of Findal to add in the 3rd Polar Blast, and I think that is perfectly fine, arguably even better in some cases, and that's the iffy thing about Heart of Findal, right? Sometimes it's amazing, sometimes it's really bad. This is a little more stable in the sense it always does the one thing. It always does the one thing. It's fine, it's great. If you don't have Heart of Findal or you don't like it, you want to decrease the number of non-blocks you have, go ahead and put this in place of the Heart of Findal. Now, Brain Freeze. Okay. So, I've been getting more and more underwhelmed with this card in this particular meta. Now, like I said, Lexi is the big bad. And I was happy to cut cards if I thought it improved my Lexi matchup. So for me, where I saw Brain Freeze, that every time I played it into Lexi, it was simply a coin flip. Firstly, you can't play this on their turn, because you play this on their turn, they just respawn a Voltaire. They just respawn a Voltaire, and they either pitch away the 0 cost or they load the 0 cost, and then you're really, really sad because this card did absolutely nothing. You just discarded a card for nothing. What I found was that the best time to play this was on my turn when they have a face down card in Arsenal. So, they can't Voltaire, or they can activate it, but they're losing a card anyway, they don't get to load. That was the best time I found to play this card, which, funnily enough, is also the best time to play Warmonger's Diplomacy. Right, it's the exact same time, because you play Warmonger's Diplomacy when they have a face-up Arsenal, it doesn't really mess with them. It's only when they need to activate Lexi that your Warmongers will mess with them, and it's when they can't activate Voltaire, their Brain Freeze will mess with them, and those kind of overlap and be the same thing. So I ended up in Warmongers, which, like I said earlier, I didn't really completely like, particularly because of the lack of its relevance in my other matchups where I'm running attacks, and so it's very difficult for me to make the decision to call War or Peace. That being said, I probably would just go back to Brain Freeze, just accept that, into Lexi, it's still as coin flippy as Warmongers is, but at least it has a bit more relevance into Ninja, and Runeblades not going to be relevant for a while, so, again, I think this is a fairly replaceable slot. I think this is a very meta call slot. This was amazing back in the day when Fi was meta, when Fi and Briar were super meta, the aggressive versions. This is amazing into them because they run so many 0 costs. You can just snipe their blue a lot of times, and it was awesome. And this Ranger meta, where they can instant speed, load their 0 cost, instant speed pitch their 0 cost, I was getting more and more underwhelmed but with this card, so hence why I cut it for the Warmongers, though I think it is totally fair to just go back to it, because Warmongers is a little underwhelming, and we already have the punish in terms of if they don't run Trench, we already have the punish in the form of Encase. So I think it's totally okay. Just go back to Brain Freeze. E-Strike. So I laid out my package just now, the 19 cards I like to bring in several matchups, and there simply just isn't space for E-Strike, and I wasn't missing this card. I think at best, this would probably come into the mirror, like maybe you can take over that one of Freezing Point I was talking about to go in the mirror, but I think it's a slight upside at most, if that, in that case. Some people I know say this is really good into Dromai. I personally am very, very happy running Tall Arcane spells into Dromai. I personally prefer that plan. Of course, you know, something like Freezing Point can't hit a dragon, whereas E-Strike can. It's more flexible on that front. But yeah, I wasn't missing this card. And I think there's enough attack actions in Scars, Bowls, and Fighting Spirits alongside 6 Icevanes. And then the Sinks. I realized that in any 60 that I want to present, I had enough good cards. I didn't really need to dedicate more sideboard slots to E-Strike. And I preferred, instead of dedicating sideboard slots to Lexi, which is why you saw that fairly big, you know, that's 9 full cards I'm dedicating to Lexi. And so E-Strike had to go. And then Command and Conquer. It is getting a little dark. I hope you can still see this, but yeah, this is a CNC. Yeah, I know some Icelanders have added this into the list. I mean, I was a huge fan of this when I first started playing Iyslander, but that was because Fi was meta. And a lot of times when I send this into Fi, they will stare at it for like 3 minutes and then take 6 and lose out of one arsenal because their whole hand is block 2s. Now though, like I said, I don't want, and this thing says attack in its type, which means I'm never running it into Lexi, which means, and I don't really feel like I need this into, say, something like Briar. It's an extra popper for Dromai, that is about it. But I think 6 poppers alongside being able to kill dragons on the layer step, alongside just taxing them out with stuff like Channeling Frigid and Blizzards, I feel like I want to dedicate more slots to trying to kill them rather than trying to pop stuff and survive. And so, you know, this is also a card I didn't really miss. I wasn't missing extra poppers into Dromai. I just wanted to try and kill them with Tall Arcane. So, yeah. Didn't miss CNC, didn't miss E-Strike. Did miss Brain Freeze a little. Like I said, I mean, it's since this took the Warmonger slot, and I'm kind of never casting Warmongers. It's very similar to Brain Freeze. Very few times you actually end up casting this. Most of the time it just blocks. Most of the time it just pitches, just like Warmongers. But a couple of times I did play the Warmongers. I think I would have preferred that was a Brain Freeze. And then Polar Blast, like I said, with just the Heart of Mandal slot, go ahead and put whichever one of those two that you would like. It is not that big of a difference. And just to reiterate, I'm not going to say that Lexi matchup is still favored, even with that package of 9. I just think it is, is in a sense more consistent than trying to play fair into them, because you've just upped your consistency of stealing their entire turns back to back, the whole time leaking Arcane into them. That was the idea behind it, and naturally that's not like a hyper consistent game plan. It doesn't work all the time, but it works more often than you'd think, and it works more often than a game plan where you try and play fair and try and, you know, deal with the stuff on the combat chain. So yeah, that's that. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.